In this video, I'm going to cover a feature which I think is one of the reasons why Gloo Gateway is the best open source API gateway leveraging the Kubernetes Gateway API. This feature is called Delegation, and in this video, I'm going to show you how you can use it to delegate with control. So let's get started. So first of all, I'm going to create what I would call a parent HTTP route. So an HTTP route is an object which is part of the Kubernetes Gateway API. Normally you reference a gateway as a parent ref and you define some host name you want to listen request for, and finally you have a backend ref where you define the service where you want to send the request. And if you look at the standard and you look at the reference, you will see that in this HTTP route, the backend ref is generally a Kubernetes service, but it can be implementation specific for any resource. And we use this fact to introduce this delegation mechanism. So here, imagine you have a team that is in charge of the gateway. This team would be able to define this parent HTTP route and delegate routing for any request for this domain name. We'll delegate the routing for an HTTP route that is going to be created by the team, the application team in charge of the HTTP bin application, so that they would be able to define the fine-grained routing. So here we'll start with a very simple example. I delegate all the routing to any HTTP route in the HTTP bin namespace. You see the name star, so it can be any HTTP route. And then I have the team in charge of the HTTP bin application can create a chilled HTTP route that is going to send all the traffic to HTTP bin 1. So it's really this team that decide where the traffic goes, right? It's not the team in charge of the gateway. It's really just this team that decide it's going to be handled by HTTP bin 1. So it's a pretty simple example. And now I can see I can access this /get endpoint because it's really looking for any request with any matcher. Now we can make it a little bit smarter by, instead of like delegating the full / prefix, maybe the team in charge of the gateway only want to delegate the status prefix. So here we can update the parent HTTP route to have this pass prefix equal /status, and the team in charge of the application may be creating some fine-grained rules, and here they can start with having an exact matcher for /status/200. And in that case, I can now access this /status/200 and get a 200 response code. Obviously, if I would try to go back to the get, it wouldn't work because there is no rule anymore for that, right? So I get a 404. So that's the first thing that can be done. As you can see, you can have like delegation of a full domain or delegation of even just a prefix. Then what you've seen here is that the application team just indicated an exact matcher that was starting with the same prefix as the parent one. And some team like this approach, some others prefer not to repeat this prefix again because perhaps they want to use this chilled HTTP route to attach it to multiple parent HTTP routes. So in that case, you can create the HTTP route with a special annotation where you indicate that you want to inherent parent matcher. So I rewrite the same HTTP route, but in that case, instead of matching for /status/200, I just say I want this exact /200, and because it has this annotation, it's going to be translated by Gloo Gateway into /status/200. So if I try to access the /status/200 endpoint, it still works as expected. So that's another nice feature here, like giving you flexibility about the way you want to handle like the path in the chilled HTTP route, either using like relative or absolute path. Um, there is another thing that is pretty nice is, as you can see here, I have um, I have defined the chilled HTTP route, and normally what you do with the Kubernetes Gateway API is that if you want the gateway in the Glue system namespace, which is our case here, to access or to expose a service in HTTP bin, you normally need to create a reference grant to allow the Glue system namespace or the HTTP route in the Glue system namespace to access the service in HTTP bin. And to avoid this, in delegation, what we do is we allow the chilled HTTP route to define the parent HTTP route that can be using it in the parent ref section. So here I can update my chilled HTTP route and say this one can only be attached to the HTTP route that has been created in the Glue system namespace and that has this name. So it's basically doing the same as like a reference grant. Like I, as an application team, I can decide who can expose my service. So if I, again, try to access the service, it works, I get a 200 and everything is the same. Another thing that is interesting, obviously, is that when you delegate routing using this feature, you may also want to attach multiple HTTP routes to the same parent, because imagine you have a complex routing in your application, or imagine you have multiple applications behind a prefix. You don't want to define one very large HTTP route that would define all the routing, right? You want to be able to have a small number of HTTP routes with a small number of matchers. Also, you have this limit, which is something people don't really know in general, is that you can only have 8 matchers in one HTTP route. So that's also another way to work around that. But basically, what we can do is that we can attach multiple chilled HTTP routes to the same parent. And here what we are going to do is adding another one that is for slash status, and is going to target a second application that is HTTP bin 2. And one of the things that is very important in that case is, you remember we have a first matcher which is slash status slash 200, and now we have this slash status. It's very important that the order is correct, because if the Glue Gateway would translate in a random fashion, then you could have cases where the slash status matcher would be before the slash status slash 200, and in that case it will match everything, and everything would be sent to HTTP bin 2, and the slash status slash 200 will not go anymore into HTTP bin 1. But thanks to Glue Gateway, all the ordering is smart and is always done in a way to avoid this short circuiting. So we can check that here. If I'm trying to send a request to 200 slash status slash 200, it should still be handled by the HTTP bin 1. And we can take a look at that. If we look at the logs of the HTTP bin 1 application, we can see this 200 request. Now, if we send a request to slash status slash 201, in that case, we should have it handled by this other rule that says that it should be sent to HTTP bin 2, and we can check that here, right? And we have that handled correctly. So you can see this delegation feature is really impressive. It has many use cases. That's something we already had in our proprietary API. And when we decided to support the Kubernetes Gateway API in Gloo Gateway, we wanted to be sure we could deliver the same, because that's like the favorite feature from all our Gloo Gateway customers. So here you get the advantage of an open standard like the Kubernetes Gateway API, and still you get the delegation. And it doesn't break any standard. It's just like using the fact that you can define anything in the backend ref. You can still use Argo rollout on the chilled HTTP route if you want, and so on.